Okay, welcome. This is a presentation to discuss with you how to use the Foresite sensors in order to detect early signs of illness. And I want to make sure that you have a chance to look over these, to view them on your own time. You'll also see that Jennifer has attached a post quiz for you to complete. Please email that back to her as soon as you can, so that we can complete our documentation of training. The grant time frame is only a few months longer, and we need you to actively participate over the next few months so that we can finish this grant successfully. So we are looking at the Foresite sensors. They are in some of the resident rooms at your facility, and all of the nurses receive health alerts via email. All staff can receive fall alerts via the tablet that's located in the medication room, and then the nurses and administrators also receive fall alerts via their email access. When you get an email, it looks something like this, except without those teal lines and boxes that I've placed here. You'll see that there'll be an alert summary. It will show that you, let me do that. Okay, you'll see that there'll be an alert summary. It'll say who this is for. Typically, this is a research ID number that's here, and there's also a list of who that corresponds to near the tablet. Your name is in here because the email was sent to you. And again, the residence ID code is here, and then there's a description of what the alert was related to. For this particular resident, it says that resident number 6311 had one health alert since Sunday, and then you can click on this button over here so that you can view the data on the interface. So when you do that, it'll bring you to a login screen, and you'll log in. Your login looks something like this image on the left-hand side, and you may see something similar to this fall risk or fall walking speed, gait speed, stride length screen. This individual received a fall alert on 6/16, and anytime we get an alert, which is indicated by this red line, orange line here, that indicates that the resident has an 86% chance of falling in the next 3 weeks. That's pretty significant, even though it doesn't look like there's a huge amount of change that's going on here. There has been a change in stride time, so the tan is stride time. The dark green is average walking speed, and this lighter green is stride length. We can also look at tug times too. But the alert just indicates that a change has been seen by the computer, and that resident has an 86% chance of falling in the next 3 weeks. So Foresite predicts falls for our residents by looking at how they walk, that gait speed, stride time, stride length. And we can see those actual falls as they occur within the camera area and view those right away when one of those comes through. So if you are a nurse and you get a fall on the camera at home or on an email at home, you can look at that and know that it was a real fall, and you can call and make sure the staff are also following up. The staff will have access to those on the tablet, and then hopefully we can use some of that information to identify how we might prevent those falls in the future, as far as did they trip over something in the room. We saw one individual who climbed up their dresser to reach something and then they fell, some things like that. Normally when we do fall risk, we do that by doing a walk in a physician's office about once a year. And normally some gait speeds for a 60 to 69-year-old male is 134 centimeters per second. And for a female, 124 centimeters per second. And then that goes down as we get older. There's a lot to do with gait that you have to look at, really, that stance and stride and how your legs swing. And there are so many numbers that it's really effective to use the computer to calculate this instead of doing it visually. So a lot of the tools that we use in the past aren't very valid and reliable. What that means is that one person might rate walking speed at 134 centimeters per second, and another person might rate it at 145 centimeters per second. They're not consistent. And so if we can't get a really good, valid, and reliable walking speed assessment, it makes it more difficult to rely on that assessment when you're doing your fall risk routines and assessments. So we also typically only do this once a year, whereas if we have something in the residence room, like the monitors, depth sensors that we have with the Foresite sensors, then you can obtain hundreds of measurements a day. But when we see that someone actually triggers a fall alert is when they have a change of 5 centimeters per second is recognized. And that's when that alert actually goes out. And that's consistent with the literature on what a significant change actually is. If you're interested in reading more about falls and how the system predicts falls, you can go to the agingmo.com website and look under references or resources, and you'll see quite a few articles that have been published about that. Also, it's great if you can somehow track your falls. So show everyone how we're doing. Are we doing better? Are we doing worse? Are we helping our residents to reduce their falls, or are a lot more residents falling? So if we monitor at least monthly what the fall rate is, a fall rate is typically measured by long-term care facilities as the number of falls per 1,000 occupied bed days, and set some benchmarks for your site based on state or national goals, or maybe a competition between two different facilities, and do a couple of things that you might be able to do to help prevent fall risk, such as making sure the hallways are clear, making sure residents have shoes on when they're walking out in the hallways, and things like that. Then we can really start to see if we're making an improvement or not. This is a slide that just shows you how to calculate the fall rates. Many of you already know that. Calculating a rate, the number of falls times 1,000, and then divided by a number of patient days in a month time frame, for example, allows you to compare to the state and national trends. The current trend in Missouri is 4.2%, and then nationally 3.2%. And then you can just show where your site is at, and if you're making an improvement or not. So there's also some other health alerts that are important for you to consider, and we can use these health alerts to help identify illnesses that are not yet noticed by staff or residents. So this is an example of a health alert. It says that yesterday the time in bed for this person was higher than usual. They had daytime bed restlessness, daytime time in bed, and overall walking speed has been increasing for the past 7 days, and nighttime time in bed has been decreasing for the past 10 days. If we click on this view data on the interface, we can take a look at that data, and this is what it really looks like when the researchers look at it. This grant is trying to determine if these words here, this alert summary, is just as good as looking at the data. And if it is just as good, then is it more acceptable to nurses and other staff members to read the words instead of looking at the data? So when we look at, just kind of briefly, if we look at this pattern, this is a density map. It's showing restlessness and time in bed. As our resident becomes more restless, we get that darker blue color. When they're less restless, it's that gray color, and if they're out of bed, it's white. So you can see that the person's had some restlessness, but it's not too bad over here. And then in the middle, there's some blue, a little bit more blue down here earlier in the evening, and then they go back to this lighter blue and green pattern. And so there's something that happened here in the middle where they might have been ill, and they spent more time in bed, but they were also more restless. Those are some of the things that we can look at and to identify some patterns so that we can say, oh yeah, she had pneumonia. Then if we start to see this pattern again, we need to really pay attention to her lungs and make sure that's not recurring. Some of the staff at other sites around the state have given us some ideas about how to incorporate these alerts into your daily routine. They suggest, first of all, reviewing the alerts either daily or 3-4 times a week, and then share some of the graphs and information with physical therapy, home health care, review for cognitive decline, overall decline. Family members also like to see the graphs. It helps them to understand things like they're spending a lot less time in bed at night. This is why they're tired in the daytime. And you can use it for some anticipatory guidance teaching for the family as well. Adding to bi-weekly meetings, and then look for UTIs and adding therapy as needed. So here's an example of a graph. This is actually, up above is activity in the room, bedroom, bathroom, living room, etc. And down below is heart rate in blue, and respiratory rate is this darker color down below. I put a oval around this because that's what I want to pay attention to. And when you can see that the resident's heart rate is kind of, although sporadic, is up a little bit higher, and then we suddenly have this drop in the heart rate on this right side. Now, first of all, we need to check the bed sensor and make sure it's placed correctly and plugged in correctly. But what we also notice is that this resident has end-stage renal disease and is on dialysis. They're in and out of the hospital, so that explains this blank period here. But the pulse will go up and down because of that end-stage renal disease, and they have such drastic changes in their fluid status. So that explains why we're seeing such a change, such a swift change in that heart rate over time. And if we didn't talk about those things, then we wouldn't necessarily realize that that's a possibility. We also might not realize that there may be a problem with that bed sensor. It might not be plugged in correctly. And we can anticipate that if the resident's heart rate starts going up, that they're starting to have some fluid overload and may need to go back in for some additional dialysis. So this particular resident has several alerts that are related to bathroom use. And typically they have a fairly steady pattern. It's at nighttime here, but they've had several alerts that were related to an increase in bathroom use. And these nurses at this site used these alerts to obtain a UA and determined that they did have a urinary tract infection. This is a walking speed and a tug time alert that's come in, one on the July 30th and one on July 24th. So I kind of explained walking speed earlier, but you should also realize that tug time is a estimate of the time it takes a person to go from a sitting position in a chair, stand up, walk 10 meters, turn around, come back, and sit back down. And that's another really good measure of walking and fall risk. So this person has had two alerts on fall risk. They've also had some balance related falls on the dates that are listed here. This individual refuses physical therapy, and so what they're considering is adding a shared risk agreement. It identifies that the facility and the staff are aware that the resident is at high risk for falls and does fall, but that the resident's refusing care, and it helps legally keep the facility from having a legal battle related to negligence or lack of proper care for that resident. This is a increased bathroom alert. There's actually two here, one on top of each other, but I kind of cut off that other spot. And this individual has been showing some increasing alcohol use. They're going to actually refer this individual to a psychologist for additional therapy and treatment, and that'll likely change this bathroom use alert. So another bathroom use alert, but this is really sporadic. We go from not very much use at all to huge amounts of use and everything kind of in between. So one of the things I see with something like this is I worry about dementia when we see some sporadic patterns. But we also note that this resident cleans her own apartment and bathroom, and so the staff check to make sure the resident has actually been cleaning, and if they need to, they will check a urine to rule out a UTI. Also, this an additional caregiver noticed that the resident had a bruise that appeared about 2 days ago, and they used the rewind camera to note that the resident had gotten up from the couch and struck a coffee table, and they noticed too that she's been sleeping on the couch more. So they're going to follow up and monitor this individual for wandering, which could be a pretty significant change in this individual's habits. So just as a reminder, I know you guys use point-click care. Make sure that you document as much as possible during the upcoming 6 to 12 months while we finish up this grant process. Any changes on your residents, changes in behavior, health condition, follow-up vital signs after a fall, those are all important aspects to make sure you document. And of course, more detail, the better. So make sure that you indicate what is going on. Like this first one, instead of saying the alert was received and no change is noted, you might be a little more specific that a fall risk alert was received, there was increasing tug times, no other changes in condition were noted, physician was notified, and orders were later received. So just review that. The more detail you can give us, the more successful our grant can be, and we can really improve the system overall. I know sometimes it seems like this is just some wacky thing that we're doing, but we are seeing a lot of improvement in outcomes. We're seeing that residents are staying a lot longer in our homes, and that means that our homes do better financially, and that's always a positive thing. So please complete the post-test. It should be attached to the email as well, and then email that back to Jennifer, and we will get back to you soon. Let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.